Rated in the best hearing aids of 2024, the Audien Atom 2 series offers superior sound quality and functionality for a fraction of the price. For just $189 a pair, the Atom 2 features 4 different hearing modes for all types of hearing loss. It packs crystal clear sound, a nearly invisible design, and is even rechargeable.
I actually like them better than my old $5,000 hearing aids. They're so comfortable, I forget I'm wearing them. And the sound is amazing.
The Atom Pro 2 is our smallest hearing aid yet, featuring advanced background noise cancellation, and is the world's first hearing aid with built-in UV cleaning that kills 99% of bacteria.
I could not believe how my hearing and life changed without seeing a doctor or having a hearing test.
Join over 500,000 happy customers today and get the hearing you deserve.
Call 1-800-457-0924 or go to audienhearing.com to get your pair of Audien hearing aids starting at just $189.
Welcome to the Turnpike Sports Spotlight. Dave Weishottle with you. Anyone who listens to the show knows I have said the gaming industry gets stronger when responsible gambling programs and policies are in place. Sports betting is out there and it's still expanding, and I don't care if you're a state, a country, a pro team, or a college team. It is essential that strong responsible gambling programs are in place, or else bad things happen. And when I think of responsible gambling and compliance, I think of one place, and that is Integrity Compliance 360, or as everyone refers to it, IC 360. For me, they make the gaming industry safer for not only consumers, but also for the operators. And to tell us all about IC360 and the incredible job they're doing, on the line we have Matt Heap, Managing Director of Prohibet, and Dan Trolaro, who is Co-Managing Director of Education and Training for IC360. Matt and Dan, great to have you both on.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure, and we appreciate the invite to get on the show here.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah. Pleasure is all ours. We are big fans of IC360. But, Matt, let me start off with you. You know, it seems like every week on this show we talk about the great things IC360 is doing and the deals you're making. You have deals with leagues and operators all over the world. But for people who are listening out there that aren't part of the gaming industry, what is IC360 and what does it do for the gaming industry?
Well, really, at a super high level, it's a watchdog integrity, kind of an oversight company that manages integrity monitoring, education, prohibited better solutions, compliance related solutions, auditing support, licensing support with regulatory jurisdictions. We're really a compliance-related company that just augments and supports not only operators, but also sports properties and anybody else in the ecosystem that's really looking to shore up and put some good guardrails around some of their integrity practices and safe betting and responsible gambling initiatives. And, it's a really comprehensive approach to try and shore up a lot of the things that have come along with legalized gambling in the States.
Yeah, and as we talk about the comprehensive approach, and Matt, that's a great way to describe it, because we put those guardrails in place and we can monitor and watch and try to preserve the integrity of the ecosystem of sports. But then there's also layering on that element of education, and that's where I come in as Managing Director of Education here in North America. We're doing a lot of work with the leagues, with the operators, with teams, with clubs, organizations, to help educate people around, okay, well, why does this matter? We have the guardrails in place, we're watching, we're monitoring, but let's also try to prevent people from getting tripped up, either from gambling-related harm that might make them do something that they otherwise wouldn't do, or perhaps they weren't aware of the laws or the rules. We're talking 50 different states and multiple jurisdictions. It's a lot to keep up with. So that's really why we're the leader in that space, to really help people make informed decisions and also try to prevent people from falling down a trap that might get them jammed up or hurt sports betting or the ecosystem as a whole.
Now, Dan, you've been around the gaming industry a long time and had experiences that the average person probably doesn't have. And you've come from 1-800-GAMBLER and Epic Global Solutions. Both are great companies when we're talking about responsible gaming. So you're the perfect person to answer this. For people out there who are saying, why do we need education when we're talking about gambling? What are responsible gambling programs and policies so important for this industry? I mean, what would you say to them?
That's great. We're recording this now, end of July in Columbus, or middle of July this month in Columbus. Yeah. We had the National Council on Problem Gambling's annual conference. Mm-hmm. And you see 750 people from all different walks of life, different industry, different stakeholders, all converging to talk about the common theme of problematic gambling, but also responsible gambling. And I want to be very clear that those two are different. They need to be addressed differently. One of the things that we talk about for operators is that people don't use responsible gambling tools because they're associated with being used by problem gamblers. And that's part of the issue. That's why we need education. We have to drill down and get rid of some of these fallacies that people think. We tend to think that responsible gambling tools may not work. Well, they do work. It's how they're used, how they're deployed, and they're constantly evolving. So it's important that education is based on prevention, essentially. So if we can prevent issues before they occur or reduce the amount of issues due to some education, then that's helpful. We talk a lot on college campuses, and a couple of phrases that always stuck out to me. I have college-age student athletes that say, I have friends, we don't gamble, we just bet on sports. And it's that misconception of not understanding what gambling is or what it looks like to help people make healthy and informed decisions, because that's what this comes down to. If we're looking at healthy choices and healthy decisions, we want people to analyze and evaluate their relationship with gambling. What will it look like? How do you do it in a safe manner so it's a form of entertainment? What would problems start to look like if you started to experience them? And then where do you go for help? What do you do? And it's normalizing the conversation so it's not so taboo, because we have to, elevate the conversation now that it's accessible and available in close to 40 jurisdictions. It's all around us. So it's definitely time that we continue and increase the amount of knowledge and education and prevention.
I'm glad you brought up speaking to college athletes. And this question is for both of you, because both of you have seen the changes and evolution of the gaming industry and its effects not only on student athletes, but professional athletes. And I love the fact that you have programs and workshops. And I mentioned it before, the Prohibit tool is just absolutely amazing. But I want to get both of your opinions on the landscape of college athletics and professional sports. And what are the challenges when it comes to creating an effective gaming policy and procedure in the sports betting and gaming world of today? I mean, how does IC360 achieve its goals when we're talking about responsible gambling policy and procedures? Matt, why don't you take this first?
Yeah, no, great points raised by Dan in your question. I think that the responsible gaming piece, back to Dan's point a little bit, and then kind of into how we engage with not only policy but products. The responsible gaming is not just the responsibility of the individual who is doing the gambling. It needs to be a holistic approach for the entire industry, where everybody is participating and trying to strengthen those guardrails and that's the safety nets so that it is a safe experience. It's protecting the consumers. It's giving confidence in the products that are being put out there, and it is an entertainment offering, and that it doesn't go beyond that. We obviously know that occurs sometimes, but I'll speak to ProBet as one of the products that we use, and at the highest level. And my former work life was as a regulator. I was the chief of investigations for the Colorado Division of Gaming when I retired back in 2022. And one of the things that we always knew was going to be an issue as we were promulgating rules in the fall of 2019 after sports betting had been legalized by the voters, was that there was going to be this issue of how do we protect the industry and put some, again, safeguards around disallowing prohibited sports bettors from participating and betting, and not only on their events, but betting on things that would compromise the integrity of the actual offering. And there just wasn't a way for the safe and secure exchange of information, because we're talking about personal identifying information that's obviously super sensitive and needs to remain confidential. And there just wasn't a way, as we had our stakeholder meetings out in Golden, Colorado, with the leagues and the schools and responsible gaming representatives and operators, that they would ever feel comfortable exchanging, Jim Smith's name, date of birth, last four of his social, driver's license, et cetera, to ensure that the operator has the opportunity to do their due diligence to stop that person from signing up and betting on football if it's a football player, or betting on sports just across the board pretty much if it's an NCAA athlete or coach or trainer or official. And so as you fast forward and we implement technology, which I think is such a big piece of this topic and conversation, it's one of the main focuses of our company, is utilizing technology to create these safeguards and these compliance tools to assist the industry. We fast forward to roughly 2 years ago when ProAbet went live, and we were able to get that off and running and gain the assurance of roughly over 100 plus operators, schools, sports properties now that are actually utilizing the system to do this cross-checking and entering of their prohibited bettors. And we've achieved something that I think, at least in my mind, back in 2019 was just pie in the sky thinking. We're over 100 million checks against the ProAbet database at this point.
Wow.
There's been over roughly 10,000 alerts generated. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean there's 10,000 instances of violation or of law or policy or whatever else, but there's 10,000 instances that needed to at least have a little further dive or deeper look by the operator in the school or the sports property to ensure that they're putting the proper constraints on a sports betting patron's account so that they can only bet on the things that they're supposed to, and they're not engaging in something that 13 months later we find out that an NCAA wide receiver at some big school has been betting for 13 months on things they weren't supposed to do. We can spot it either on the very first instance, or we can flat out just prohibit it before it ever gets to the wager. And so it's been a huge accomplishment. And in my opinion, as a former regulator and now somebody that is deeply invested in compliance, arguably the most critical and important tool to enter the legalized sports betting space to protect the integrity and also identify issues if somebody's repeatedly trying to do this, that maybe that's an individual that may need some help, because if they're repeatedly trying to do this and they keep getting alerts, that might be somebody that has something else going on that maybe that sports team or league or whoever can identify early on and try and get them the help that we need for that individual. And that's why Dan and the education pillar at IC360 works so closely with ProAbet, because it obviously is two different sets of products that just go hand in hand, and they complement each other on an ongoing basis every day. And it's not just Dan and his team shows up and does an education session for 2 days and then they disappear. Our support through ProAbet with ongoing education and compliance initiatives help these schools and sports properties really keep a good handle on what's going on a daily basis.
Yeah. And Matt, well said. And that's why it's great that we can do these together, because, that ProAbet almost feels like and operates like a voluntary self-exclusion platform to some degree. We're making sure that people don't get jammed up and they're prohibited from wagering on certain items, events, or what have you. So they're excluded from those events. And to Matt's point, some people do things because they start to experience gambling-related harms. And we see that. And it's important then that those individuals, the colleges, know where the resources are, whether on the campus, whether at the county level, perhaps the state level, or nationally. So we're constantly reminding them of what maybe problematic behaviors start to look like, what it feels like, how it impacts your mental health, your performance on and off the field, in the classroom, wherever it may be, and also who you can talk to. Because this is important. These are lives. These are people. And yes, they're not just looked at as statistics or NIL or dollars. These are human beings. And as a person who's been on a journey of recovery for 15 years, February 11th of 2010 was when I last placed a bet, and it's a journey of recovery. I can relate to those as someone with lived experience. Myself and my colleague Ryan Tutusco from Texas, former MLB pitcher, we go around school to school, colleges. We hit almost 50 colleges last year, 18,000 people, to talk about these harms and what to do and how to deal with it. So we want to keep the ecosystem safe. We want to make sure that if someone's being approached to give inside information, that we can talk about that, what to do, how to handle it. If someone's being threatened, we're starting to see more legislation around the country around threats. So if you're an individual who's wagered on an event and you've threatened the player or the coach, and you're found to have threatened that individual, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law in certain states and jurisdictions. So we're starting to see an uptick in a demand to keep for safety and well-being of the athletes and coaches. And all of that is communicated through education to make sure people are understanding what the rules are, understanding what the potential concerns might be, but also to evaluate their own relationship with gambling so they can make healthy choices.
Prohibet has been such an amazing tool in the gaming industry. And by the way, I should have said award-winning Prohibet technology, courtesy of the American Gambling Associations. But in my opinion, and the opinion of many, many others, it's such an integral and important part of the gaming industry today, especially when you're talking about the integrity of a sport. I know a lot of people that listen aren't part of the gaming industry. Can you go into a little bit more of how it actually works and how does it actually function in the gambling industry? Because just talk to anyone who works in the gaming industry. Prohibet has been a revolution, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, not makes a lot of sense, and really, and I'm probably not going to be doing it the ultimate justice in explaining it, but it certainly is going to be the high level, explanation, and appreciate the kind words that you've said about the product. It really, at the highest level and the most simplified way to explain it, it allows the sports properties, professional, collegiate, to define their list, which is assisted by typically regulation in the state or by policy by the league or the NCAA, which defines who can and can't bet on sports or what sports they can't bet on. It allows for that entity to create their list. And I am really simplifying this down. So they create their list on the school or the professional league side, and then they upload their list on software that is installed on their network, unless they choose for us to host it, but it's installed on their network. It is encrypted through one-way cryptographic hashing, and that basically turns the name, the date of birth, the phone number, the email, the zip code, et cetera, whatever fields they put in, it hashes it into this gobbledygook of a bunch of different digits and numbers that is then uploaded into the Prohibet server, which is basically the pipeline in the middle between the sports property and the operators, and it just sits there. On the operator side, whether it's a sports book or a daily fantasy operator or whoever is contracted to use the system, what they will do typically is when somebody either creates an account or logs into an existing account, they will ping against that database that just has hundreds of thousands of hashed pieces of information. And when they query against it, their information at the sports book gets hashed in that same way and is anonymized and is turned into all the gobbledygook information, like I just said, the string of data. And then when those match in the Prohibet server, it generates an alert that immediately goes back to the operator and to the school or the professional league that says, you both have just received an alert, log on to your secure and confidential Prohibet application, and it will then give them the details of what fields matched.
Wow. So
that they will know, hey, we had somebody with the first name, last name, date of birth, and an email and a phone number, and then we will score it, very high all the way down to medium or low on the confidence level of thinking it may be the same person depending on how many fields matched. And what it does is it immediately puts those two entities in touch with each other in a confidential, secure environment so that they can communicate, if necessary, back and forth about well, what's going on? Or did this person actually, attempt to make a bet or just sign up for an account and it was blocked? And so they would be able to go back and forth between, operator 123 and school 123 and know we just had this alert and we can, kind of deconflict on what's actually occurred. And it allows for that to stop future transactions. Or on the flip side of that, let's say it's somebody that was on a list and maybe they just graduated the day earlier and they shouldn't be on the list anymore because they're no longer prohibited by NCAA policy. It would allow for them to have that communication that, okay, this person just was done. We'll get our list updated so that it reflects that. But in the meantime, everything's fine. And it can let that transaction or that betting account sail on through. The other things that it does, especially for the pro sports leagues, is it allows for, let's say it's an MMA league or a golf league that have specific policies that maybe only prohibit betting on those individual sports like golf. And that it allows for the golf entity that uploaded their list of 250 people that can't bet on golf. It will identify to the sports book, this person that you just got a match on is only prohibited from betting on golf. Everything else is okay. And depending on the different level of sophistication or customization that the sports book or the fantasy operator may have on their platform, they can kind of tailor that individual's account or customize it so that in the future, when that person logs on, neither property is going to have to do that work over and over again. They will have known that, well, this individual is on the, XYZ golf league list, but they're trying to make a bet on Major League Baseball markets. So that's fine. Just let it sail on through. No harm, no foul. It doesn't interrupt the flow of the business for the sports book. It doesn't interrupt the flow of legal, sports wager from occurring by somebody that is entitled to make that bet. It just puts the proper guardrails around the accounts based on, what the sports property has indicated is the prohibited markets. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. But my question is, Dan, I'm curious, when you're communicating to athletes about gambling and proper gambling policy, how is that the technology presented to the athletes? I mean, certainly when you're talking to college age or even professional athletes, you want to address their concerns, talk about what's expected of them and what's the appropriate behavior when it comes to gambling. But is there also a discussion of, hey, look, there's a technology out there that will tell us if you bet, how much you bet, who you're betting on, where you're betting, what time you bet? I mean, is knowing the technology out there part of an athlete's responsible gambling education, especially when you're explaining a policy that they're expected to adhere to? I mean, is there kind of a scared straight kind of thing when you talk about the technology out there? Did you bring Matt in to scare the hell out of him? How do you weave in the technology aspect of the education program?
Yeah, it's a great question. And scared straight, I think sharing my story with them might scare them enough, but right. we definitely talk about technology, and it has to be a part of it because, when we look at the ecosystem and the landscape, it's really changed. What the college age individuals or the athletes don't realize sometimes is when they sign up for a sports betting account or an app on their phone, every time they log in, they're giving consent to the operator and the regulator to ping their location. And that is the thing that really, really opens their eyes. Because every time they go in, we know exactly, not we, but you know exactly where an individual is, where they're opening that, trying to access that app from. And that's part of the geolocation and targeting, right? So, and tracking. I'm here in New Jersey. I'm in North Jersey. Early on when sports betting was allowed in 2018 after PASPA was repealed, we saw the stories that first week of the NFL in northern New Jersey, people flocking across the GW Bridge to bagel shops up across the bridge up in Fort Lee and placing their Sunday bets because New Jersey had the geolocation, they had the sports betting, and then they'd go back. And so we remind college age individuals with athletes, we say, this is your policy. NCAA presently, as we're sitting here in July of 2025, are not allowed to wager on anything for which there is a championship offered by the NCAA or a path to professionalism. That is the rule as we sit here today. Not to say it'll still be the rule in months from now, but that's the rule as we sit here today. So we tell them, don't risk your scholarship, don't risk your eligibility. And here's the technology that exists that also is watching you. And so we highlight case studies. And this is what student athletes and athletes really love to hear, is they love to see examples of other people who've been jammed up, either intentionally doing through some nefarious activity, or perhaps they made a mistake. Some of what we share is individuals sharing their story. They were jammed up in the Iowa State. We have a college football player who, through his NIL deal, gave us some exclusive content to kind of talk about his experience on what happened when he was at Iowa State. And the feds came in and took his phone, and they gave it back to him. And they didn't say one word. They got what they wanted. They got what they were looking for. And that was a whole big mess that we saw in the news a couple of years ago. So we definitely highlight that geolocation is a real thing, the integrity monitoring piece. Through the use of Prohibet, we can know through working with your school, if you try to establish an account on certain sites, or if you're trying to access and make wagers that you're not supposed to, that's going to come back to you. And you don't want to risk your future or your education or your scholarship. But what we also know is that telling somebody not to do something makes it extremely attractive to actually do the thing I said not to do, right?
Yeah.
And we use the example all the time. You go out to dinner and the server puts down a hot sizzling plate of fajitas, and the first thing he or she will say is, "Don't touch the plate; it's hot." Mm-hmm. And they generally laugh, because a majority of the athletes in there are wired just a little bit differently, and they know they're going to touch the plate, and because they were told not to. And it's a silly example, but we just want to highlight to them, it's not whether you do it or don't do it. It's if you choose, it's a choice. If you choose to try to wager on something that you are not supposed to or allowed to, you may be caught. And if you're caught, there could be penalties. And depending on the severity, they could be pretty bad. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to come out of college with a jacket. You don't want to come out, and I mean a criminal jacket, mm-hmm. Any kind of charge, a felony, any kind of conviction. You don't want to come out. And if you're struggling with your decision-making around gambling, talk to somebody about it. It's okay. And that's where we really encourage and loop back in the support services. So we definitely bring and put a good emphasis on how technology is used to keep the ecosystem safe, but also to keep themselves safe, because these individuals, oftentimes anything below the age of 29, your brain development is still taking place, and decision making is the last piece that comes along. So they're going to make bad decisions. We're there to try to help them avoid the catastrophe, and having those guardrails and education, we're just trying to reach as many as we can to help them avoid that issue.
Maybe if I could add just
Sure.
a little more onto that, because some of the comments and feedback that we receive, I know Dan does a survey when he's actually when his team is at the universities doing the education. But I have lots of contact literally on a daily basis with different athletic departments at the schools. And that's where we actually see that and get the feedback the most compared to the pro space, because it's one thing when the compliance athletic associate AD is at the beginning of the year sitting there saying, here's your 7 forms. You need to initial all this. We've told you can't do this. And it's in one ear and out the other, right? Not reading the fine print and just like, what do I got to do just to get back to working out or going to school or whatever else? It's different when we're in there giving these presentations and we actually get to the slides. And they have told us that they have seen the responses, and Dan could testify to this because he's actually at the schools and can see it himself. But the athletic directors say it just carries more weight sometimes when it's coming from somebody else, and you show the slides on what Prohibet is and what it's going to check and what you are not supposed to be doing per policy, and how this will actually, identify when you attempt to do it. And you will see people kind of pull out their phones and kind of like look at their accounts and talk to their buddy next to them and almost like, man, we better get rid of these things because we have them. And one of the things that really kind of resonates is that we have fantasy operators, daily fantasy operators, who also use Prohibet. And one of the interesting things with that, as well as some of the other betting type of markets that are out there, is that they're 18 years old and up. They're not necessarily 21 years and older, which is why those are so popular in the collegiate space. And quite frankly, a lot of these kids are dragging some of these accounts in with them from high school. They get there, they don't think it's that big of a deal because they were doing it in high school. And then they get there and they're told, listen, that is viewed with the same lens as if you sign up for a sports book. If you sign up for a daily fantasy or prediction market or whatever else, you are engaging in what the NCAA defines as sports wagering. And the word of mouth on top of them witnessing that presentation, and then when they find out 3 weeks later when one of their buddies tries to log into website ABC, and then the next thing you know, they're sitting in maybe at the athletic department's office and they're asking them questions about, what's going on. That word of mouth travels quickly. And we've been told by these different institutions that has had a huge deterrent effect, but also a very important education effect, which is what we're trying to do. This isn't an aha gotcha type of tool. It's meant to be proactive and preventative, and the education component coupled with the ability to actually check that somebody's not doing this after they've been educated and told not to do it really has been a force multiplier, and it's been a game changer for the schools that have really hopped in and utilized the full potential of the tool.
Yeah, it's like the trust but verify. We're going to give you some education, but we're still going to be there monitoring on the backside. And Matt, you just hit two things that I wanted to raise a couple of quick points. Predictions markets. We're starting to see a rise in activity there. A lot of sports contracts are being traded on call sheet for sports prediction markets. So that's just another provider of opportunity for someone to potentially get themselves jammed up with. And also just making a comment about bringing along accounts into college. We see just an increasing number of parents who will open up accounts so that the kids can wager. The kid can wager with his father, with the mom. Maybe they have older siblings. And now you start running into issues around proxy betting. You start running into, okay, well, I'm not placing the wager, but my brother's placing it for me. He's 23. So this education is kind of far-reaching, and it covers so many different areas because these are ways that we're seeing people get jammed up as they enter into college or into pro sports.
Yeah, and Dan, you just brought up a point that when ProBet was being contemplated, I don't know that we necessarily thought that it would have as significant of an impact or identification, at least an investigative nugget, into proxy betting as it has, shown out after roughly 24 months of activity. And what we have seen from reports back, because we don't see any of the alerts, we don't have any visibility into any of the personal identifying information or lists. But when we are tapped in by maybe a school or university to either help them through maybe, one of their first investigative instances because of a ProBet alert, we will hear these stories. And one of the ones that we've heard is just to Dan's point about the parents that have maybe opened up an account for their son or daughter, or maybe the student athlete just knows their parents' login credentials. The parent may not even know they know this. And because maybe the first name and the last name match on ProBet, but the date of birth didn't, and maybe the home zip code did, or maybe it's a family email. I mean, there's lots of different things that ProBet is pinging across that we're finding that although the initial design wasn't about identifying proxy betting, there's been several self-reported instances by the schools that is exactly what's happening. To Dan's point is that, well, when we brought the student in, they ended up saying, yeah, I used my dad's account. The dad, lives in a completely different state, didn't know any of this was occurring. And we're able to at least, help them identify that. And I guess that was kind of a nice unintended consequence of the success of the system and what high quality alerts it's been generating, is that they've also been able to kind of stumble across some of those instances. And it's been very helpful for them too, because again, going back to the word of mouth, when that starts to travel around the campus, it's like, man, you can't even use someone else's account, right? That's perfect. It's the having the surveillance camera sitting somewhere, and does somebody know if it's really recording or not? The mere fact that it's there and they think it maybe is working has a massive impact. And we are repeatedly told that is in fact kind of an ancillary benefit that they're discovering.
You know, I said the people outside of the gaming industry probably don't hear the word pro-bet a lot, but if you're a sports fan, you certainly have seen the effects of the pro-bet in the sports world. What has been some of the high points of pro-bet so far, and what effect has it had in the collegiate and professional sports?
I would say that the fact that we are being told, it's hard to measure something that stops occurring after a point in time because the numbers start to go down. But so, I mean, when something stops existing as in a statistic, we can only have from what the user, the system are telling us the positive impact that it's having. But we are seeing the amount of alerts go down for specific institutions. And the same thing is said for the operators that are using it. They'll have an initial glut and a high activity of alerts when they first integrate and start using it. But as the passage of time goes on, they really do start to flatline. And in some instances, they decline rapidly when they couple that with a good proactive educational compliance program. And, I guess some of the success stories is that although we continue to see things in the news, I do think we have witnessed fewer news stories maybe in the collegiate space than what we were originally seeing, because this has helped them, to Dan's point, actually have a tool to test that, in fact, are you guys not doing this anymore? So I don't know that I can necessarily share a specific incident with you like that. Because again, we're only privy to the information or the stories when one of the sports properties shares that with us. And they obviously have, especially pro sports leagues, huge reputational damage that's at stake should those things continue to happen. But when you see fewer stories and you have some of those one-off conversations with the different universities and they tell you that it's having a positive impact and that they're seeing fewer alerts each month as the passage of time goes on, that to us is success and one of the things that we were hoping to aim for. Yeah. We've also seen that this exact technology, and it was always intended to be broadly dispersed just outside of prohibited sports betting individuals. We're moving into self-exclusion space where people could utilize the same exact technology to go in and self-exclude so that they don't have the ability to go into casinos or online casinos and online sports betting. And it would be a way for them to really help protect themselves and give them a good tool that can utilize this exact same technology. So those are the other areas where we're trying to expand the product to help even more so with responsible gaming initiatives.
It's even important as we think through the life cycle of say, even an integrity breach or an issue. When things hit the news, and things start circulating, one of the areas that the questions always come up is, okay, well, what was that team, that league, that organization doing about combating an issue, addressing gambling? Because it's all over, right? There's gambling on emerging leagues, existing leagues, new sports, old sports. You can find a market, whether legal or illegal, in almost anything these days. Mm-hmm. So in the legal regulated space, which is where we want to operate and where we want to funnel all business, if you're an organization and there's some type of breach or an issue, and someone says, well, what were you doing to address this? And your answer is nothing. That's a big problem. Yes, especially in today's climate. But if you sit there and say, listen, we provide education, we have technology that we use, we do this education in person, we do it digitally, we do it virtually, we monitor, we have regular meetings, we're doing what we can and always looking for new ways to do more. Well, that's a better answer than saying we've done nothing, we've put our head in the sand and we're not thinking about it. This has to be top of mind right now for leagues, teams, conferences, clubs, colleges. It has to be top of mind because we're not just talking about the legality or the regulatory impact. We're talking about mental health, well-being, decision-making. For some people who experience harm, it's a public health matter. It's addiction potential. It impacts families. So this touches so many different elements. It touches financial literacy. It touches so many different areas that need to be addressed. So there's lots to think about and talk about. But for those organizations that say they're doing nothing about it, I would challenge them. They should be coming to the table, and we should be talking more.
Dan, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, for me, the most amazing thing about the sports betting and gaming industry, that it's constantly changing and evolving and expanding. Certainly in Latin America, especially Brazil, they're really just starting their sports betting industry. And I love the fact that IC360 is down there working and helping their industries along. And I'd love to hear both of your opinions on whether you approach a market differently when it's in its infancy. I mean, Dan, do the workshops and presentations differ when the sports industry is just starting off? And Matt, is the technology used in a different way because sports betting is really just starting off and in its infancy? I mean, in 2018, sports bettors were thrown into the deep end of the pool because in the U.S., I don't even think I've heard of this kind of technology in 2018 and 2019 or the educational programs that are out there nowadays. Does the age of a market and does the culture of the market make you approach how to address responsible gambling policy differently? I mean, Matt, why don't you start off and go first on this one?
Yeah, I can say absolutely there are some factors there that they're at an advantage because this technology now exists and they wouldn't have to play catch up. So when they hit the ground running with this embedded already in their the way they conduct day-to-day business, and they're using integrity monitoring from day one, and they're using prohibited better solutions like ours from day one, it's obviously going to put them just at a better starting point than a lot of us here in the States did. And all you have to do is look to the other countries that have had legalized or quasi-legalized sports betting, the issues that they've had to combat after the fact, and how difficult it is to get the toothpaste back into the tube on a lot of these things that are massive problems. When you can start off with the right safeguards in place from day one, you're obviously at a much better place. Now, that being said, the challenge is, as we expand our footprint outside of just North America, is that you are dealing with some of the different operators that don't have the same level of understanding sometimes of the regulatory piece that you have in the States, because either the regulations maybe are a little lax or a little different, or the oversight is not quite the same. So that's something that we obviously try and help them with, providing the level of expertise. I mean, with the individuals that we have on staff at IC360, just in the regulatory advisory place, not including my 30 years of working with government, but we have the former director of New Jersey Division of Gaming as part of our advisory staff, another individual from New Jersey Division of Gaming that was there for 30 years. I mean, we have probably over 100 years worth of regulatory experience in sports betting and gaming in the legalized market. So that's one of the things that we're able to bring to them from the get-go, especially in areas where maybe we're working with regulatory bodies or governments that are trying to adopt a framework of what works, what should we do, where are the pitfalls, what should we stay away from. And when you don't know what you don't know, that's where you can really step into problems. And so we're seeing that our advisory services are really having a huge impact on that as well, so that it helps just to design an entire responsible framework that's laden with integrity and has, like we keep saying, safeguards in the right places, so that you're not trying to fix things after the fact.
Yeah, and by market, by jurisdiction, by sport, it does change. It does differ. I'll think about when PASPA was repealed in 2018. It left the decisions for a lot of things up to states, right? States' rights to decide whether to legalize it in their jurisdiction or tribal land, whatever the jurisdiction is, how to regulate it, how to enforce it, how to collect the tax rate, where the money goes. So lots of things, right? So we have some markets that are immature because maybe they just authorized gaming or sports betting or online wagering in the past year. And maybe some like New Jersey have been around since 2018. They were ready to go from the jump. So a more mature market. But then you have leagues that are now being developed that I never frankly would have even imagined wagering on, whether it's slap fighting, whether it's cornhole, whether it's disc golf, you in college, you can, in North Carolina last year, they allowed for wagering on rowing competitions. I mean, there's so much variety. It's like a buffet that you can now wager on. But each market then is going to have people towing the water to see, okay, let me see what this is about. Let me understand this sport. Maybe you're someone who really enjoyed watching volleyball, and now you can wager on women's court volleyball. That's great. The concern would be if there was an integrity issue, right? So now all of a sudden there's some nefarious activity that's discovered. That hurts the confidence. And when consumer confidence erodes or consumer confidence is crushed in an area, it's going to be very difficult for that sport to come back and have any kind of meaningful representation in the gambling world. So we work with emerging leagues consistently. As a matter of fact, while we're on this, doing this recording today, we just announced another partnership with with BetParks today to use integrity monitoring and to use Prohibit. So just another good win to help preserve the ecosystem, because we don't want confidence to erode. We want to help emerging leagues understand what best practices might look like. What are other leagues in your similar situation doing? What's a good practice? How do you follow that? What's consistent with what we're seeing? We've worked with one league in particular that was emerging, and just because how they did things in the past with their athletes, there had to be a big change. And we help guide them through that process, as Matt said, with our consulting services. We help draft the legality of the policy. This is what we feel would be appropriate. This is what you need to think about. And we help work and handhold the club or the organization and the senior leadership team so that we can try to create the safest and best performing outcome, whatever that looks like for them, so that they can have folks wagering on their contests, so that their athletes are safe and protected, and that any other folks touching the sport are clear on what the guidelines are. We don't want to have any ambiguities. We don't want to trip people up. That's never the goal. We want to make sure people know exactly what it is, and that's what we provide education around. Because if we're working with one league, here's a reminder of what your policy is. Be very clear on it. And we ask them some questions. They have to convey understanding. It might look different from another league. So that's how the education component really complements the Prohibit and the integrity monitoring of sport, is to make sure that we're all starting from the same launching pad.
The great thing about IC360 is that you have thought of a lot of things in this industry that, it's incredible the protection you're giving to a lot of people. I love Alert 360, which I think is an incredible tool that helps athletes, coaches, and the athletic staff. And it's just an incredible tool. Matt, talk about Alert 360, because it's one of those great ideas that is sorely needed in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the stories with the athlete threats that we are seeing, unfortunately, probably on such a regular basis now that it may even be losing some impact with people that see it. Oh, there's another story, but that does not diminish the fact that it is absolutely unacceptable and doesn't need to be tolerated. And I think one of the things that we're seeing with Alert 360 is that it's an instant, immediate conduit that somebody can report things that aren't right. And whether it's threats, whether it's something that they've observed that they know is not right or cool or should be going on and is an integrity issue, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's utilizing that technology again for immediate, instant access. And I think one of the things that we've heard too, as we have different folks that obviously represent the different products at the company. But one of the things that I think I've heard as I've been a part of some of these discussions when the product's being demonstrated is, I think a lot of places just almost have gotten to the point where it's such a recurring event that like athletes and places almost feel like we just have to put up with this. And they don't, nor should they. Mm-hmm. And it gives them the mechanism to report something like that, because if that person's doing it to one, they're doing it to several others. And it's something that now they're not able to operate with anonymity behind their phone and say things and make threats. And I'm going to do this to your family, and you're this and you're that because you made me miss the under, whatever the case may be. It's a super powerful tool. And I really hope that it continues to gain traction, because it absolutely can help to bring those things that I think a lot of the collegiate athletes or professional athletes have just kind of thought, you know what, in the era of social media and everything else that is online, you just kind of have to live with that's just part of being a pro athlete. Yeah, maybe some of that's true, but not with the stuff that we're talking about here with the threats and the potential legal activity that maybe is going on that they need to tell somebody about. It's a game-changing tool that, again, just couples with a lot of the other things that we provide to help get the right information in the right people's hands so that, action can be taken.
Yeah, and that's what dovetails nicely with the work around the country. We're starting to see states pay attention to this. We talked about this in December. I put together a panel for the legislators conference, Nickel G's, down in New Orleans in December. And on the panel, we had myself, we had Randy Livingston, the former NBA player, who's now one of the trusted voices for FanDuel, where he shares his story. We had Deshaun Hanukkah, the tight end for University of Kansas, who was jammed up in the Iowa State issue, sharing his talking about his story and what he sees as a college kid. And then we had a guy from NBC Sports, named Eric, and I can't remember the last name off the top of my head. And he's a predictions analyst. He provides his weekly picks on NBC Sports for the college football slate of games. And all three of them were talking about threats and harassment. And Deshaun was really highlighting, and even Eric was saying, as someone who's a predictions analyst, when his picks don't hit, he gets threats. And they're all getting threats. And it starts to impact the mental health. And, it's kind of like that dripping water and that dripping faucet that we have in the house. Like, it doesn't bother us day to day, but there's going to come a day where you can't get the sound of that drip out of your head. And that's what threats are like. It's hey, I'm going to kill you. When I see you, I'm going to slap you. I'm going to punch you. I'm going to kill your mom. I mean, that's mild. I mean, it gets really graphic and really distasteful and disgusting. So having a tool that anonymously allows people to upload or report that threat that can be further investigated, that's what the legislators in the state start to see. And they say, okay, well, if we find these people, we're going to blacklist them. We're going to block them from any of the gambling websites in our jurisdiction. And we're going to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law, whatever the laws are. We're even seeing operators starting to look at this a little closer. I had some great conversations in Columbus, Ohio last week with a few of the operators where they said it would be interesting to think through those individuals who are threatening athletes or coaches. We don't want them on our platform. We don't want them gambling on our platform. So we would like a way to kind of exclude individuals who are acting in that manner. So there's this nice rise of interest and things are getting done about it because you don't have to take it. You don't have to be spit on walking off the field or spit on by a fan who just lost $1,500. These are individuals who are not trying to miss shots or drop passes. I mean, it's sports. And when someone can't handle themselves in an appropriate manner, they can't use the product, right? If we think about it as a product, they don't know how to use the product, so then don't use it. You're misusing the product, so now you're banned from using it. And we're starting to see a lot more interest. And this is a tool that allows people to report it safely, anonymously, and then let the powers that be do the investigation while you still continue to perform on the field or on the court.
By the way, I want to thank you on a personal note. Being a gaming attorney, I love Playbook AI, which has every gaming statute, regulation, and rule out there in the world. So basically, basically what I'm saying is I'm very lazy, and you're doing all my work for me. So I'm lucky Eric Frank, I know, it's amazing. I'm lucky Eric Frank's your CEO is a lawyer, so he knows exactly what I need in this industry. So thank you guys for that. So what's next for IC360? Do you have anything coming out in the next couple of months that people should be on the lookout for in the near future? Dan, anything new you can share with us on the education side for IC360? And Matt, is there anything new regarding deals for Prohibit that you'd like to share with us?
Well, for education side, we're now quickly ramping up for another years on campus and also working with leagues, operators. We're starting to work with operators more closely, working with states. We've inked a number of deals at the state level where they're now looking to fund our education. They've seen the success that it's having. They see the outreach. So now we have states getting behind it to start funding education for schools within their jurisdiction. We already are sitting at 40 colleges, and it's July. It's end of July. School year hasn't even started. We have 40 schools already either booked with dates or just pending a confirmation of a final date for the next school year. So we're going to be pushing in-person visits probably between 75 to 100 this year, as well as our digital education, which has been tremendously well received. We've developed and brought in-house our digital education platform and working with leagues to provide digital solutions So again, it's continuing to work and grow education in many different ways, providing modules, providing leave behinds for people, because education isn't just one and done. Education has to be an ongoing initiative around critical times or critical events. So we're constantly thinking of new ways to develop and push out insights and information from an education perspective. But yes, the digital, it's the in-person. And then also working, this was announced last month, I believe it was, we partnered with an operator to pilot a high school education curriculum. And this is a big one, because when we think about product knowledge and we think about gambling, we want to lean into prevention. And if we know that gambling is initiated early on in many cases, for myself, I was gambling at the age of 12 with my father at the racetrack in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So you're introduced to it at an early age. So we want to help schools, give them the tools that they need to talk to the students. So let the educators do what they do best and educate, but we're going to give them the topics, the tools, and how to talk about these things. And the pilot was very well received in New Jersey, and we're going to be looking to start a phase 2 of that this coming year. So stay tuned on that. But getting into the high schools, there's a big appetite across the country for this.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about Brazil and everything else, and we're obviously expanding our footprint outside of the U.S. But, as the coming months approach here, just as a tease, can't specifically divulge names, but we'll have some more good announcements coming out that will really help to add some more bandwidth to the pro bet coverage in the legalized system here. And so, our lofty goal, and it's the one that we'll have forever with the product, is we need and want ubiquitous coverage across the entire industry, whether it's schools, professional leagues, operators. We are making vested efforts in going out and getting these, even some of these different markets that are offering different types of wagering added onto the ProBet system, because we understand that that's super critical, that we have as much coverage as possible so that these schools and leagues that have some of these vulnerable individuals and don't want to have a bad day to wake up to in the media have as much coverage as possible to shrink those windows of opportunity for bad things to happen. So I guess I would just say there's going to be some more announcements on the horizon. We are really pushing hard during the summer because, as you can imagine, the start of the sports betting calendar really kicks off and is in earnest for football season. Yep. And so everybody is in their constant push, no matter where they're at right now and through August, to try and get things done. And we're involved with lots of different entities right now to get to the finish line on some stuff.
We're running out of time, but can one of you give out a website for IC360 so people can find out more about it? Also, if you have any social media addresses you want to give out so people can keep up with what's happening with IC360?
Yes, it's www.ic360.io. And again, it's not .com, it's .io, www.ic360.io. And that's where they can find information about our monitoring, our ProBet services, advisory services, education, Playbook AI, which we talked about before, Alert 360. They can kind of keep up to date there. That's also where they can contact us through the website directly. Also follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on social media channels. If you type in IC360, we're going to be pretty easy to find.
Matt Heap, Managing Director of ProBet, and Dan Trolaro, Co-Managing Director of Education and Training for IC360. Thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about IC360 and the incredible work you're doing in the gaming industry. I've said it many times on this show that the work IC360 does for the gaming industry not only is great for the consumer, but it's also great for the operators because it makes this industry stronger. Please come back on and keep us updated about what's happening with IC360 because it's always incredibly important for this business. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.
Thank you,
brother.
That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on the Turnpike.